Hi, my name is Santiago Forbes. I'm a product of an incarcerated father, and I don't really have too many memories, and I'm going to explain that through this podcast. And this is the Express Yourself podcast. Thank you.
All right, so this is Express Yourself podcast, back with another interview. Ding, 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 ding.
Bing, bing.
Hey. All right, so what is your name?
My name is Yesenia Morales, now Forbes, because I am married, or was married. I'm divorced now.
Yeah, legally, what is your name?
Yesenia Forbes.
Okay, there we go. So, how old are you?
48.
48. Wow, that's good. All right, so did you have any parents that were incarcerated? Or,
Yes.
Still currently incarcerated?
My father was incarcerated. He went to prison when I was 10 and got out when I was 14.
Okay, so he went for 4 years.
Yes.
For that type of question, did your parents explain, your mom explain that to you? Your family try to hide it? What was the situation with that?
So with my situation, what happened was my father was a drug addict, heroin to be specific. He, the way he supported his habit was robbing people.
Most people do.
And he was robbing someone's house, got caught, got arrested, went through the trial process. I was not aware of any of this.
Oh.
I came home from school one day, and my mother informed me my dad was going to prison and was going to be gone. Unfortunately, my grandmother, my father's mother, wanted my mother to lie to me and not tell me that my dad went to prison.
Okay.
So my mother they tried to persuade my mom to lie to me, but she chose not to. I didn't know why he went to prison until I was an adult. I just know that he went to prison.
So you didn't even know what was going on until he got convicted?
In the sense of him going to prison?
Yes.
Yes, I had no clue. I didn't know why. I didn't know anything that was going on. All I knew is that he was going to prison.
Okay, and then what did your grandmother want your mom to tell you that was going on with your dad?
She wanted me to tell my dad. She wanted my mom to tell me that my dad was going back to Nicaragua, where he's originally from, for 4 years, or just make something up so that I was not aware of the fact that my father was in prison.
Okay. So he only went for 4 years, hasn't gone back or anything like that?
No, he only needed one time. I know he has been in jail, not since he went to prison. Prior to him going to prison, he had been to jail. Yeah. But after he went to prison, that was it for him. He only needed one time in prison. He learned his lesson.
Okay. So you said he only went for 4 years. What was your experience with, having an incarcerated father for those 4 years?
It was difficult. It was embarrassing. My father, unfortunately, my parents had me young, and my father was immature. He'll say he was immature.
Yeah.
He was 21 years old when they had me, and he was not ready to be a parent.
Yeah.
So he was immature. He lived in the same city as I did, but we didn't spend a lot of time together. When he did pick me up, I would spend a lot of time with my stepmom. So him going to prison, it caused a lot of I don't want to say tension or friction, but it changed my life because I spent a lot of time with my stepmom, and when he left, I was not allowed to spend time with him because my father was gone. Although when he would pick me up, that's who I would spend my time with. So my dad was gone. I didn't get to go to my stepmom's house. I had a little sister and a little brother that I was not allowed to see while my father was gone as well. So it caused a lot of divide in my life and in my family because he was my connection to his family.
Yeah.
So because he was my connection to his family, I wasn't able to see a lot of people on his side of the family.
Okay, so it's pretty much for those 4, you went from, seeing them, on a regular basis, those 4 years happened, and it was, since he wasn't the one picking you up and you couldn't go on your own.
Yes.
You were just kind of like stuck.
I was stuck. I mean, I saw them, but I didn't get to see them with the normalcy that I saw them prior to that happening.
Okay. And, how did that make you feel? Like, did it bum you out? Did you, wish things could have been a little different?
It made me sad because my stepmother is a very loving, caring person, and unfortunately I come from an abusive background. So when I would spend time with her, I would get love and affection that I wasn't getting at home. So I lost that. I lost time to spend with my little sister and little brother and bond with them. And I just didn't get to see my dad's side of the family. My mother was not interested in making sure that I maintained a relationship with them while my father was away.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, yeah, shoosh. Yeah. So.
It's enough to make you want to drink.
So besides, not, being able to see your father's side of the family, like, what was, like, the worst? Was that the worst thing, or was there, anything worse than that?
I mean, I guess you would have to say worse in relative terms. Like, how do you understand at 10 years old, not knowing why your father even went to prison?
Yeah.
My mother didn't let me go see him the whole time he was gone. I was able to go visit him once.
Okay.
And that was when he was in fire camp. So he wasn't even, like, the visiting at fire camp is not the same as visiting in a prison institution.
Okay.
The people in fire camp, they get are afforded a lot more freedom because they behave well and they've earned all these points and these rights and these privileges. Okay. So yes, he's still incarcerated, but he doesn't have his freedom. So I got to see him in that setting as opposed to in a prison visiting room.
So a follow-up to that is, what exactly is fire camp?
Fire camp is where they send inmates who are have earned the points.
Yeah.
They have, goodwill, better behavior, and they're able to learn how to fight fires. They're actually, in this day and age, what they're doing is they're letting inmates who were in fire camp, they're expunging their records and allowing them to become firemen if they choose to.
Okay.
They didn't have that when my dad was there, but that's what they're doing now.
That gives them a career once they get out.
Exactly.
So
that's true rehabilitation. That's true rehabilitation.
Yeah, that's really good. Let's see. Do you resent your father for being incarcerated, or just the bad relationship you guys had? Or
I no longer resent him. I did resent him for a very long time, unbeknownst to me. Like, I didn't realize it was resentment until I was older. And then when I realized it was resentment, I had to deal with it. I resented him for leaving me with an abusive mother, knowing that she is an angry person with a bad temper. I resented him for going to prison. I resented him for picking me up and not spending time with me, instead of dropping me off with my stepmother. So we had a very difficult road.
Yeah, no, you kind of got a double whammy with him. He was absentee and he was incarcerated.
Yes, so it was a two-prong situation.
With the incarceration, you're like
yeah. So my ex-husband is also incarcerated. So I'm a little bit of a double-edged sword, because not only am I the product of a parent who is incarcerated, I also married someone who is a career criminal and has been incarcerated the majority of my children's life. So I am also dealing with what is happening to my children and how they're dealing with I'm also dealing with my children and how they are dealing with their father being incarcerated. I have three children. My oldest daughter, her stepfather is incarcerated, and he was a very big part of her life. And then my son and my daughter, their father is incarcerated. My son has anger issues and can be very rebellious, because his father has been incarcerated pretty much his whole life. My youngest daughter, she has no childhood memories of her father, and he has been incarcerated her whole life. So I deal with it on both ends. I think that I'm a little more understanding and compassionate with my kids, because I know what it feels like. I don't want to say push. I encourage them to write to him, talk to him on the phone, and try to build what relationship they can with him while he's incarcerated. My son is very receptive to it. My youngest daughter, not so much. But she has some issues that she needs to deal with between her and her father. My oldest daughter, she, I think, resented him for some time, but is rebuilding her relationship with him.
So, going with your children, how exactly do you deal with the issues that they developed from, having, an incarcerated father?
One, I try to talk to them a lot and help them to understand that it has nothing to do with them. It has to do with the choices that their father made. Yes, they suffer because of it, and I can understand that because I had a father who was incarcerated, but I also help them to understand that it's not forever. He is going to get out, and regardless of anything, that is still their father. Just because you make a bad choice doesn't make you a bad person.
Yeah. And then with your son's anger issues, do you give him any exercises, or you just try to talk to him?
I talked to him. He did have a period in time where he did a lot of fighting, and that's when we began to discuss and try to understand things a little bit better for him, because one, growing up without a father as a young Black Hispanic male is difficult. And then on top of that, for your father to be incarcerated, that makes it even more difficult. And then being embarrassed of the fact that your father is incarcerated adds even more pressure. So, he's had his ups and downs. I tried to make sure he played a lot of sports. But, he's an ass. So if he doesn't get his way, he decides he doesn't want to play the sport. So I talk to him, I empathize with him, I explain to him that I can relate to how he feels, even though I'm not a male. I can still relate to how he feels because my father was incarcerated. So I just try to keep him focused, driven, and occupy all his time.
All right. So you mentioned that you were embarrassed about, explaining that your father is incarcerated, and then you did mention that your kids had some issues explaining that. How exactly did you yourself deal with it if, when you were a kid and somebody asked you about where your dad was?
So at first I just avoided the question. I didn't want to talk about it. And then I just kind of came to terms with the fact that he was incarcerated. So I just explained to people that, he was incarcerated. My children at one point in time were told that my father was in college. So for a very long time, my kids thought that my dad left for 4 years to go to college. As they got older, I explained to them that he didn't go to college per se, that he was incarcerated. They didn't know why he was incarcerated until they were even older. But I also come from a person who chose not to lie to me, so I choose not to lie to my children. However, when they were younger and their father would go away for a violation, or if he committed a new crime, what I would tell them was that he was on timeout, because that was very relatable to them, because when they got in trouble, they would have to go on timeout. So when their dad did something where he had to go back to prison, I would tell them he was on timeout.
It's a very simple and accurate way to, state what, being incarcerated is.
Yes.
Because they are isolated,
on timeout.
On timeout.
Yeah, so that is just a term that we used.
Yeah, no. So, when it came to, the actual, telling of the lie, why did you just decide not to?
To my children?
Yes.
So I went along with it for a while. And then as they got older, in my opinion, it's just wrong, because what you do in the dark comes to the light. So I didn't want them to get slapped in the face with the reality that they may not have wanted to or been prepared to deal with. So as they got older, I did start to explain to them, and much like, how they know their dad was on timeout, I explained to them, well, no, Grandpa didn't go to college, he was on timeout. And then as they got older, Grandpa was on timeout. Yes, Grandpa was in prison. But I also was trying to respect the fact that I don't know, because my siblings have children, and I don't know if they told their children that my father was on timeout or incarcerated. So I had to do that very delicately, because children talk, And I didn't want my children expressing to their cousins something if their parents didn't want, because the way I parent is not the way everyone else parents.
Yeah. So, with your husband being incarcerated, how did you deal with, going to visits? It went from 1 to 3. So it was a transition, and it was very difficult. I was fortunate enough to be able to see a lot of California, visiting different prisons, but it was hard because it was me, and I had one who was a not tween, not toddler, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So she was younger but older, and then I had my little two, and they were both actually in diapers at the same time. And so it was very difficult to maintain one and carry the other one in a car seat. So it was very trying and very difficult. I had my god sister who lived with me. She would go visit with us often as well, so that she could assist with taking care of, carrying, and bringing the children in, because he wanted to see his children. Yeah. And I respected that. Now, I can say that if I had it all over to do again, I don't think I would have taken them to the prison. No?
I just don't think it's an environment for little kids. So at the time, I did believe in my heart it was the right thing, because they were able to see their father. But I have to say with 100% honesty, I'm not sure if I would do it again if I had it all over to do again. It's just difficult for them. My son, every time we would leave, would cry because he couldn't grasp or understand why we were leaving, and his father couldn't come with us. Okay. So I think to me, and this is just to me, I think it's a little torturous to little kids, because they know they get to see their dad or parent, whether they're going to see their mom or their father, the mother or their father. So they know they get to see their parent, but they don't understand why their parent has to stay there. And then my oldest daughter, she would cry every time, because although she has a different father, this was her father figure. And so she couldn't handle leaving him there either. My youngest daughter's just mean, so yeah, she didn't cry.
All right. So would you say this topic of, the perspective of, a child of incarcerated parent needs to be talked about?
I 100% think it needs to be talked about, especially being a child of an incarcerated parent and then having children of an incarcerated parent. I think that they feel very alone. They feel isolated. They're embarrassed. They're confused. And there's a lot of emotions that they have to deal with. I think that our society deals with the incarcerated person and if they have a significant other, but I don't think anyone focuses on the children, how it affects them, what they have to go through, what, things they have to deal with. And I think it's sad and unfair that our society does not take into account that just because they're children, it still affects them. Children are just small people. That's all they are, small people. They take, they listen, they pay attention, they take into consideration everything that's going on, and they definitely know more than we give them credit for.
Yeah, no, of course. I've had 6-year-olds come up to me and explain something very simply, and I'm like, dude, it's way more complicated in my head.
Yeah.
So that's it. Do you have anything you would like to say to the viewers? Any advice? Anything like that?
I just think that if you have an incarcerated parent, you are not alone. There are so many people that can relate to it. Being one of the owners of this podcast, one of the things that we are going to discuss very soon are statistics. And, how many children, how it affects them. Do they go into a life of, criminality as well? And I just think that it needs to be brought to the forefront that these children are suffering and struggling, dealing with the fact that they have a parent incarcerated. It's one thing to have a single parent or have your parent co-parent. It's a whole other thing, not to be able to see your parent because they're incarcerated. A child cannot go visit their parent alone. They have to go with an adult. So if the child wants to see their parent and the adult in their life does not want to see their parent, they don't get to see their parent. if they don't have someone who can take them, if their parent doesn't want to, then they don't get to see their parent. I think it is difficult to build a bond and a relationship with a parent incarcerated, but if you have no access to them, then it makes it even more difficult. It is something that is very prevalent. It's very real. I would have to say almost every family has someone who is incarcerated, and people just don't talk about it. It is not as taboo as our society makes it. It's just a reality. And things just need to change. Things need to be spoke about. Things need to be addressed. Things need to be put out on the table. So I really plan and hope that this podcast takes off and it brings awareness to everybody. It lets other children know that they're not alone and that they have someone that they can relate to and can relate to them and can understand how they're feeling, what they're going through, and what all these things are doing to them. Because it is embarrassing, especially, if your best friend, has a mother and a father in the household, and you have your mother and no stepfather, and your father is incarcerated. You don't want to talk about where your dad is, because how embarrassing is that? Or the flip of it. Yeah. So, I think that it's very important. I think that it's something that needs to be brought to the forefront. And like I said, they talk about the incarcerated person, they talk about their insignificant other, but no one has ever addressed the children. And I think that this is something that needs to be put out there so that children know that they're not alone and they don't have to be embarrassed, because there are other children out there like them.
That is correct. All right. Thank you for being on our podcast. We look forward to seeing your face, some more. And, please comment, like, subscribe, follow us on Instagram and all that jazz. Peace out.